Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. I have a great topic for you today. Now, they changed the public charge rules. There are new public charge rules in place. I want to talk to you about it. It's very, if you're applying for a green card or you're coming into the country, as you're coming in by air or by car at the border, you're going to want to know these rules to be able to understand how to approach it and what you may be facing. Now, the topic today is how receiving public benefits, public benefits from the government, can affect your visa or it can affect your green card, getting approved for a green card. Being a public charge means that you're inadmissible to enter the United States. And so it's a requirement that you not be a public charge, but it is one of those very important red flags that a lot of people don't think about. And I'll give you an example. When immigrants come here to the United States, sometimes they may come and they may be pregnant. So the woman might be pregnant and she comes in on a B1 or B2 visa and ends up giving birth here in the United States and takes Medicaid in order to pay for the cost of giving birth to the baby. And you have had many individuals who have lost their visas because of this, because that was the one thing they did not think about, the repercussions of taking public benefits such as Medicaid to pay for medical expenses. Now, it's arguable whether that applies, because in the past, pregnant women receiving emergency Medicaid was not considered a public charge. However, remember that the visitor's visa, is discretionary. And so when an officer is looking at whether you qualify to get your visa renewed, they can always look at it as a negative that you took public benefits. It means to them, it shows that you may not be able to afford you cover your trip or cover your expenses in the United States. And so it often leads to revocation of the visa, cancellation of the visa, or denial of the visa if they feel like that will be your goal to come to the United States. In order to come to the United States, and you're likely to become dependent on the public system. Now I'm talking about the new rule that went into effect on December 23rd, 2022. And as a result of this new rule, there is a new form that has been implemented, the adjustment of status form, the I-8485 form. If you are going to apply for permanent residence in the United States, you're also going to be now subject to this public charge rule, and you're going to have to be understanding exactly what's in that form in regards to public benefits. But I'm going to explain these rules, and one thing that should ease your mind here is that if you recall, if you've been following immigration law for a while, you recall the Trump administration's rule, which was a nightmarish. It checked everything from your medical records, your employment records, your credit score, how much debt do you have, your past education, your age, whether or not you have a disability. And so that was pretty scary for many immigrants going through it, because you just didn't know what to expect. This is definitely not that. It's not as scary as that whole process. It doesn't require additional forms, just additional questions on the adjustment of status application. However, you still have to be very careful, because especially if you are subject to the public charge rule, you want to be careful about how you answer questions and how you approach your application. If in my rule of thumb is, if you have received any immigration benefits, you want to make sure that you are represented through your process so you're prepared for what may be coming. But I'm going to tell you what public benefits, what is a public benefit that counts under this new rule, because it's not all public benefits. So let's get started. Now, first, let me tell you what the definition is of the public charge rule. So the public charge, and I took some detailed notes down so I could explain to you in a simplistic way, but on a simplistic way, how this works. And I want to start with what the idea is behind this rule. And it's where they find the USCIS or the government finds, so for example, the consular officer finds that the immigrant is likely at any time to become primarily dependent on the government for subsistence, as demonstrated by either cash assistance provided by state, local government, the federal government, and then also by if you have received long-term institutionalization at the government's expense. So in regard, this may be related to a mental health commitment, or it may be related to a nursing home, or being admitted to a nursing home. So if the government paid for that, then those are public benefits that are considered under the public charge rule, right? Um, so the public charge rule only covers the government. If a charity helps you, it's not considered a public benefit. This is involving government entities. Keep in mind, government entities are going to be the federal government. It's going to be a state. So if you're in Florida, you got public benefits through Florida, then that's the state. Territorial. So say you're in the Virgin Islands or you're in Puerto Rico, then in that case, it would be considered more of a territory. And if you receive government benefits in that territory, then that would also be public. Keep in mind, though, public benefits in regards to cash assistance and long-term care, right? I'm going to touch on the public benefits that are not considered under this rule, under this new rule. Now, the also local. So say your town gave you some kind of public benefits, or the municipality gave you some sort of, or the city gave you some sort of benefits. So the city of New York gave you some benefits. This would also, and gave you benefits like cash assistance or paid for your long-term care, then that would be considered public benefits that they would look at. And then also tribal. So in the United States, remember that you do have tribal government or leadership. And in those, they also count that. So if you've received assistance from those entities, then, and those the assistance is going to be cash assistance and long-term care. It could be related to mental health, for example. If you've been committed to a mental health facility at the cost of the government, or say a nursing home, or say a rehab hospital that had to have you for a very long time, then this would be considered a public benefit that subjects you to the public charge rule. Now, what are the public charge rules are not considered, right? Not considered in the final rule, which is great. SNAP, so that's food assistance. Medicaid is not. Social Security is not considered under this public charge rule. Housing, not considered. Public health, other public health benefits that does not involve long-term care or cash assistance will not be included in this rule. And that could include, say, for example, you got vaccinations at the cost of the government. That's not considered long-term care or any type of assistance that's going to be considered under the new public charge rule. Now, what if you've received daycare assistance or education assistance? That's not considered as well. Disaster relief is not considered a public benefit for purposes of this public charge rule. If you have been rehabilitated, so remember I mentioned rehabilitation for in that may have led you to be admitted into a long-term care facility. This does not involve short-term rehab, right? For short-term periods of time. Imprisonment is not considered a public long-term care or any kind of type of cash assistance. And then if in the case you were committed or you were subjected to some kind of long-term care and that was something that was wrongfully done to you, it would not be considered a public benefit for purposes of this public charge rule. So that's great. Now, I do want to mention that the public charge rule does not apply to some individuals at all, right? I think the public charge rule, this one is pretty narrow in that it does not raise many red flags or it doesn't subject many individuals to it because one, most immigrants are not usually going to qualify for things like long-term care or cash assistance anyway. In many states, when they apply, they have certain qualifications in place, and it usually does not qualify immigrants who are not already permanent residents. And even in some cases, even though, remember, the law differs from state to state, it does not usually even allow permanent residents to get certain benefits unless they've been in the United States for a certain period of time or they've accrued a certain amount of hours of work in order to be able to get the public benefit. And so many individuals are going to be subject to this public rule anyway. But now keep in mind though that I am not saying that you should make a judgment call on yourself. If you have received any kind of public benefits, make sure that you consult with me or another immigration attorney to make sure you're covered. You know how to approach your application. You know how to answer the questions correctly, because if you don't, you could end up subjecting yourself to the public charge rule by thinking you are when you really aren't, and then subject yourself to more scrutiny than is necessary. So you have to know what you're doing. You have to understand the law behind this so that you don't make any mistakes that could lead to delay, denials, or just really undue stress. No, immigrants who are not are exempt. They are exempt from the public charge rule. It will never be something that's going to be, even though it's a question on the adjustment of status, they can easily say they are not subject to the public charge rule. If you're applying for VAWA, this will not apply to you regardless. If you've received public benefits, it will not affect your ability to get your VAWA status as well as your permanent residence. Asylum seekers, also, if you are an asylee, you will not be affected by this public charge rule. Certain other humanitarian type of visas or statuses would be the T visa, the U visa, so T is for victims of trafficking, victims of certain qualifying crimes. They are not subjected to this rule. Under the Cuban Adjustment Act, so this is where Cubans can apply for adjustment of status in the United States. Granted, they qualify for, they meet some of those requirements, then they will not be subject to this public charge rule. So special immigrant visas, so they will not be subject. So there's, for example, the SIJS. So they don't qualify. And SIJS refers to special immigrant juvenile status. It's for individuals who they were abandoned in the United States by one or two parents, and they then become subject to the state. The state becomes guardians and then or assigns a guardian to them. They are not subject to the public charge rule. Usually they have to be under 21 to be in some states under 21, in some states under 18 to be able to qualify for this. TPS, if you've received temporary protected status, so if you're Haitian, and this is for certain countries, so Haitian, Venezuelan, El Salvador, these are some countries, Ethiopia, these are some countries that they have designated. Some citizens of these countries have protected status and they're not subject to this rule. Now, there are also waivers available, and some people who are qualified for those waivers would be individuals who get the S non-immigrant visa. It's a type of status that's for informants or witnesses, and then also certain disabled individuals. So if they have, if they're blind, disabled in other ways, then there is a way to apply for a waiver. And in some cases, remember that disability does require long-term care. And so this is where the waiver would be very essential to get forgiveness for that public charge issue. And, on a human level, of course, that, it's good that they have the ability to apply for this waiver. Now, if you've received public benefits on behalf of your children qualify. For example, you have mixed households. You may be the parent of US citizen children and you've received the public benefits on behalf of your children. That does not count as you receive public benefits. You receive the public benefits on behalf of your children. It's for your children. If your spouse received public benefits and, of course, it's in their name, it's your spouse that received it, your US citizen or resident spouse, if they even qualify, who received it, not you. So you need to distinguish, make that difference there. Just because someone in your household got it does not mean that you got the public benefit. Now, the affidavit of support is still very, very important in the whole mix. And of course, if you're subject to the public charge rule, the next is that they will then make a determination as to whether they are going to still grant you the immigration benefit or relief based on what's called a totality of the circumstances test. And that takes a whole other bunch of factors into account to determine whether they're still going to go ahead and move forward to give you the benefit or give you entry to the United States. This public charge rule applies to the adjustment of status process, and it applies at the border. So that means if you don't fall within those exemptions and you're at the border to come into the United States, they are going to subject you to this kind of scrutiny. And keep in mind that this is a subjective, the totality of circumstance, and whether they think, because they're going back to the original definition, it's at any time do they think you're likely to be a public charge. That's a very broad type of evaluation. So if the officer decides that based on what they've seen, you are likely at any time to become a public charge rule, they can then turn around and determine what public benefits you've received, or if based on a number of factors, whether you qualify still or you are a public charge. This is where the affidavit of support is so important, because the affidavit of support is one of those is going to be a positive factor in your favor, as long as the affidavit of support is, and this is a tricky document. It's not just something where you fill out numbers. It's a tricky document that you have to make sure you understand the law behind it. Because if you get to that interview and something is off with the affidavit, there's